Hey guys, John here. I like bass. Hopefully you do as well, because today we're going to be making this bass. And I also want to bring your attention to the spectrum view down over here. So this has a lot of harmonic content inside it. And it's very low and it's also very clean. And you can play it really fast. You can even put this through an ARP and it's going to sound just as cool. So this concept here is made via FM with a little extra on top. So let's go here to another instance of Avenger. Let's go to menu, initialize, and recreate this bad boy. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is change out our saw wave to a sine wave. So we have this guy, right? So just one tone here. So now we're going to use FM. So we need another oscillator, and this is going to be oscillator 2, and this is going to be also a sine wave. So now we can go back to oscillator 1, and let's say we want to go down here to our FM, and then instead of this sine, let's go to oscillator 2 FM. So now here we can start cranking this up a little bit, and I found a sweet spot here around 15 or 16%. And notice how we start adding harmonics via FM. So maybe something around here. So now this kind of almost sounds like a very round, smooth type of bass guitar. Now we could put a compressor on this and then maybe EQ it a little bit and then call it a day, and it would be a totally cool and usable bass for just about anything. But I wanted to go a little bit further for this guy. Now keep in mind, if you want to, you can go to your oscillator here and you can start changing some different stuff. So for example, let's just change this to a saw wave, which is going to give it a whole different response. So what we can do is we can clear out all these harmonics, something kind of like this here, and kind of have that same thing we had before, but we can change this waveform. And based on how we change this waveform, it's going to change what happens over here. So if we did some kind of extreme, let's go like 40% or something like that. So we could spend some time and adjust these different harmonics and really kind of carve out the tone of our bass, even though it's a little bit too much of this FM here. So let's go ahead and initialize and start back where we were before. So we have saw wave, let's go to sine here, add another oscillator here, and let's go to sine again. And then down over here for the first oscillator, again, we'll click here and go FM2 and then raise this about 15% or so. So we have something kind of like that. Now, the first thing I did with this is kind of, I wanted to compress it to keep everything kind of a little bit louder and also to kind of keep things a little bit in check here, bring it up, that kind of thing. So I put a compressor on here and then we might go around 8 or so. And then maybe bring up the output gain a little bit. And like I said, this could be a totally useful bass. But we can add some more details. So the next thing I wanted to add on this, if we right click here, is I wanted to do a wave shaper and kind of just adjust this a little bit to my taste, because I do like the clean version of this as well. But sometimes it's kind of nice to add a little bit of those extra juicy harmonics, you know? So we can click here or double click here and grab this note, and we can hold down a note and kind of move it around to see what our ears like the most. So for the last patch, or the original one we heard, it was somewhere around here in the middle and almost kind of to the top, something around here. And as you can see, this added a lot more harmonics. So if I were to go to mute this, we go from this to that. So we have a lot of extra content to work with. Okay, so now I have all the stuff I want. I have all these harmonics. So now I kind of want to control these a little bit more. And what better tool to do that with is going to be an EQ. So what we can do is add this EQ here. Now the idea behind this one is I wanted to get the nice, clean, almost brown note bass notes, and then also take out the mud stuff that kind of makes bass just sound gross. And maybe always a nice wide Q can always help. And remember, this is going to be a huge bass. This is going to fill up the low end almost entirely. So now we have that nice low end that we like, but then we want to also bring out that mud, which is probably around here, but we can always listen for it if you'd like to. Like that sounds like there's a blanket over the speaker and it's kind of gross. And if we bring this down a little bit, maybe widen the Q up a bit. It almost makes it a little bit more clean. And since this is cleaner here, it also gives this low end here a little bit more clarity, a little bit more presence to that as well. So if we turn the EQ off, we have a cool bass sound. It's a little bit too bright, not really enough lows. And especially there, especially this note. It's pretty nice. Okay. So now we have this bass and we say, okay, I like the sound of this. So now we want to do a little bit of filter modulation, things like that. And you might instinctively think, okay, let's reach for the filter. And you're like, this filter is weird. What is going on here? So if you ever run into this issue and kind of wonder what's going on here, and keep in mind, you can do this with different synthesizers. It doesn't have to be an Avenger, but if you are following along in Avenger, always remember the signal flow of the synthesizer. So if we started from the beginning, we had this sine wave, and it's getting FM'd by this sine wave, right? So we just kind of have that clear tone. We basically, if we turn off our stack here, we're basically trying to filter this, which is really not much content to filter. So this filter here is kind of useless in the sense, because if we follow this routing for this first oscillator, we say, okay, we have the ARP here, we have our pitch, okay, got it. We have our filter, okay, which is this guy. Then we go to our amp, which is obviously over here, step sequencer, so on and so forth. We have our sends, and then down here, out effects 1. So the compression, the wave shaping, and the EQ that we've done, the filter would happen before that. So we'd actually be filtering this and not that. So that's a signal flow type of thing to always keep in the back of your mind. If you're especially if you're making patches like this, where you kind of start off with very little harmonic content in the beginning, and then you use FX and stacks and things like that to really shape and dial the harmonics in. The filter, if it happens before that, is not going to be very useful. Now, the cool part inside Avenger is if we right click this here, we have obviously a filter. Now, the cool part about this is we can basically select a lot of the stuff that we can already select. If we go to filter type, we have our usual menu of all our filters, which is really, really cool. So for the one over here, if we move this a little bit to the side and open up an original patch, we have our filter down over here, and then there's a little modulation here on the cutoff, and we're using the vintage low pass 12 with about 25% of resonance. Okay, so our cutoff's maybe halfway through, so if we go here, and then let's select the low pass, and then we went to this vintage low pass 24. And we're probably maybe somewhere around here in the 25% resonance. Maybe somewhere around there. Okay, so this is kind of cool. Maybe we can now modulate this, but the thing is, we don't have a convenient envelope as we do over here. And since we're kind of using this filter in place of this because of the routing, what's actually really cool is we can just drag and drop this filter and put it right on the cutoff, and then we can say, let me give this 35% of depth here. So now this envelope is going to be controlling this cutoff, same as it would here if we were going to turn this envelope knob. As you can see, the modulation happening over here. And we would just move this cutoff as we would move this one to kind of put it where we would like it. Or we can give a little bit more depth here. And then we can use this here as well as how fast we want the decay, sustain, things like that. And then we can also do some drive if we want to. It's totally up to you. Okay, so we have something kind of like that. Maybe we can give it a little bit of a release as well. So we get the cool FM sound, we get some nice wave shaping going, and then we got a filter after that. And one of the last touches I kind of like adding as well is also diving into the trigger. Now, we haven't really done too much of the trigger on the channel. So now the cool part about this is that we can obviously trigger things depending on what we're doing. So for example, if we want to get this first guy here, we can click this and say, okay, note on. So every time I hit a note, something should be triggered. Now, okay, so what do we necessarily want to trigger? Now, there's a lot of cool different samples and attacks, things kind of like that. So if we're looking at this first one, at our first original patch, we go to our trigger, we can see that this guy is going to be attack click 13, which is going to be the special samples, factory 2, so you should have this as well, and let's say attack click 113. So let's go ahead and find that over here. So in our fresh one, let's go ahead and click these buttons. So we're in special samples, factory attack clicks, and then right here, 113. And you can kind of dip, whichever ones you want, you can kind of pick with. So let's just try this one right here and select that. So every time we hit a note, if we mute that oscillator, we basically have that. And here we can control the volume. If we want to how loud we want this click to be. And then we can also say we can send this to its own effect stack if we want to. I mean, this is already going to the master effects, or you can route it to its own. It really depends on how you want to process that. But the whole idea is basically, let's say you have a bassist and maybe he's playing with a pick. He's attacking the string, so to speak, with that pick. So it gets a little bit of that scratch sound. So this is kind of something that you can use to simulate that. And then mixing that with our original signal. Maybe something kind of like that. And then now we can go back maybe to our wave shaper and kind of dial this in a little bit more how we want it to be. Maybe that's more of a sound that we're looking for. And notice over here on the right-hand side how these harmonics change depending on how we move this note. Even just a little deviation from this center line here gives a pretty cool sound. So yeah, this is kind of that concept to make a cool bass with FM, adding some extra wave shaping to really control the harmonics of your bass, and then doing some EQ to kind of enhance things, and then putting the filter on it to modulate it how you want to, and then maybe a little bit of this trigger here. So we have a cool little transient that hits once we hit our bass, which is kind of nice. Now, something as well that we can add too is maybe after our filter, or even perhaps before, we can put something maybe like a delay. Something like that, right? But always take out some of that low end and maybe reduce the pong a little bit, maybe 16th notes, and reduce this mix here. I always feel that helps open it up a little bit. And another thing too, if we drop down this delay, sometimes I do this on bass because I feel like the sound is kind of cool. It kind of takes the bass out of the synthesizer itself and kind of places it a little bit in a room, which is why I love the dimension expander. And usually, like I say, this 20% is a little bit much, so we can dial this down maybe to about 10 or so, and maybe bring in the filter just a little bit. Now, if we take off the delay and kind of just notice the tiny subtleties, so this is with this off. On. It kind of just opens it slightly, almost like you're in a small little room there. So this is an effect to be used very sparingly, especially on bass, because you can overdo it and it can sound awful and just break the entire patch, which I'll actually show you real quick. Bass is completely destroyed right there at 100% mix, which is why 10 is a pretty good value for that. And then a little bit of delay to kind of open those things up a bit. It's pretty cool. So, and like I said before at the beginning of the video, we could put this on an ARP, maybe slow this down a bit, 106 or something like that. Adjust things to your liking. But yeah, you can do a lot of cool stuff with this as well. Let's put this back to the top and then maybe... Or you could actually bring the sustain down just a little bit so it's a little bit more of like a realistic bass. Yeah, you all know that one. But yeah, go ahead and try this bass. If you don't have Avenger 2, the same concept will apply in any type of synthesizer that offers FM synthesis and maybe a post filter after all your effects if you do have that option. It's a really cool way to make this type of bass. And also keep in mind too, so we do some of these crazy effects as well. So even if we probably muted the filter, we could maybe leave the EQ there and maybe mute the wave shaper. This is a perfect bass to kind of put under anything, just to have a smooth bass to carry the low end. And if you don't need something super fancy, like a really, oh, this is the perfect bass in the world, and if you just need something to hold the low end and maybe make a quick groove or something like that, this could be a perfect patch for that as well. So yeah, that's another cool way as well. Also, if you do have Avenger, another interesting thing for you to probably try, we're not going to do it in the video, but something to kind of think about, you have access to all your shapers down over here. So for example, if you're in this oscillator, you can just add a shaper with a plus, go to the shaper 1, and kind of go through the different algorithms, switch out where the frequencies are, how much gain that has, and maybe you might be surprised that you have a really cool distortion on there, and then maybe modulate that with something, maybe modulate it with the same filter that you're modulating this with. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities, because if you go in the shaper, if you haven't really dived too deep into this guy, we have a lot of different algorithms to choose from. And depending how you put these frequencies and how wide this Q is here, how much gain you have, and then modulating these, you can have a really, really cool distortion sound. And even just tiny bits right over here, something kind of like that can really make something really, really interesting. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Definitely give this patch a try. And like I said, just using 2 sine waves, one FMing the other at the same pitch, you can make a really cool bass with just a little bit of FM on there. So give that a try. Like I said, thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next video.